A few weeks ago, 2012 had its first big summer movie of the year, The Avengers. The ads for this movie were everywhere. One might even say they were unavoidable. So when we looked into the opening for this movie, we weren't surprised to find out that it had a midnight show. But we were surprised to see that it was selling out. This is a midnight on a Thursday night, mind you, when most of the people in the movie's demographic have school or work the next day. Was this movie really going to be worth being up that late and sleepily moving through the next day?
Most definitely for me.
Oh, yeah.
I love movies.
Oh, and going to midnight showings to see any superhero movie, I think that's a privilege.
You're hearing Mike Snyder and his son Alex. I caught up with them before the midnight premiere of The Avengers. Now, after hearing Alex say that, I couldn't help but wonder, what is it about midnight movies that make them such a privilege?
I think just being able to brag about it, that you're the first one to see it of the night. And, with all the other people around, you get first dibs at saying how awesome the movie was.
I don't know if I'd agree 100% with that, but that's part of it. But it's the thrill of getting to see it first. Tonight's also special because tomorrow is Alex's birthday. So when we saw that this was advertised, opening on May 4th, we were just like, wow, we've got to. And immediately we were like, we have to do the midnight showing. Yeah. So we knew we were going to be doing this for months.
Happy birthday, Alex. I assume that these midnight movie viewers would have a sense of camaraderie to some point. But what I wasn't expecting is that this could and was a family bonding experience.
I don't think that I've ever been to a midnight showing without my dad. So I think that's pretty awesome.
That is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've done quite a few of them over the years.
A lot of them.
I think we've been more lenient with him with what we've let him watch. And he's actually getting into the movie industry. That's what he's going to study next year, starting college. So.
All right. We know why Mike and Alex enjoy going to these movies together. But why is it that they have such a broad appeal? I inquired with them about this.
They've been around for so long. Not the movies, but like the characters. I think you've got fans from
when I was little.
Yeah,
I remember reading comic books for the Avengers and just Captain America and Iron Man, and I used to sit and draw and make my own superheroes and put different costumes on them and stuff like that. And so these guys inspired me since I was little, and it's neat that here I am an adult and I'm getting to share the same experience with my son.
Yeah.
And that's just incredible for me. It's so cool.
Now, I don't know. That sounds like a pretty compelling reason to go see the movie to me. Indeed, I actually did go and see The Avengers. Yet, I wonder, how do you survive going to such a late show with all the stuff the next day? Well, Alex had a plan.
Oh, you got to take a nap and drink a Red Bull, and then you're good for the rest of the night. It's challenging with school the next day, but I think it's going to be worth it.
So what exactly is the recipe to get people this pumped about a superhero movie?
I think you need a pretty awesome costume in the first place.
And a great trailer.
Yeah, a great trailer.
I'm hoping that, I don't think it will be, but in some movies, the best scenes are in the trailer and then it's a letdown. I don't think that's going to be the case here.
See, it's all coming together with what Mike said there. These people are being motivated, or at least have felt the touch of hype. It's early in the AM on Friday now. The movie's over, and once again I meet with Mike and Alex. This time I want to see if all this hype was worth it. So what's the feeling going through you right now? You just had months of hype. You came to a midnight show. Are you excited? Are you tired? What do you want to do right now? What do you want to do after this kind of hype?
I'd see it again. Right now? That was so good.
I couldn't see it again right this minute, but I definitely want to see it again. I'm definitely going to be up for a few hours because I'm stoked. Yeah. I'm hyped and everything.
The energy in the theater was amazing. Like, you can't get that at any other showing but the midnight showing.
Definitely.
Do a lot of midnight shows have that kind of energy?
A few.
No.
The
more
ones,
superhero ones do.
Superhero and Star Wars. The ones with a huge franchise.
Superhero movies are getting more and more popular, and thus more and more frequently gracing the box office. When I asked Mike and Alex if they should keep making these types of movies, they responded with a resounding,
Most
yeah.
definitely.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Today's episode in 3 acts, we take a look at what it is about superhero movies that draws us in and the hype around them. From Lancaster, PA, this is the Lancast. I'm David Moulton. Do not miss this. Act 1, I Just Can't Quit You. I think the best place for us to start is to take a look at why superheroes appeal to us so much. What is it about them that keeps us coming back to get lost in their stories? Why does something designed to capture the attention of children remain so prominent in the lives of adults? Chris Flinchbaugh takes a closer look.
When I say Batman, Superman, Iron Man, Green Lantern, Captain America, Wonder Woman, or more recently, the Avengers, I bet with each name a picture comes to mind, whether it be their logo, a scene from a movie or cartoon, or the actual character. These are all heroes that the average child in the United States looks up to, and often can be spotted wearing apparel, displaying their likenesses, and even donning mini-sized uniforms, whether it's Halloween or not. And so they, as characters and brands, are seared into our consciousness. 2 years ago, the Halloween after the summer blockbuster film Iron Man 2, and with Nicktoons' Iron Man Armored Adventures cartoon on the air, I lost track of how many kids dressed as Iron Man bounded onto my porch for candy. Batman, a perennial favorite, was also very well represented in the variously colored incarnations of his costume. There were a few armor-styled costumes after the more recent Christian Bale starring films, but the gray, blue, yellow, classic look, the one featured in Cartoon Network's Batman the Brave and the Bold, and the all-ages comic of the same name, dominated by far. These were the two most popular costumes to parade past my porch. And this makes sense. To be something stronger and bigger, and recognizably so, with a logo and look to accompany, is clearly part of the attraction for a youngster. And it can't be overstated the wow, whoa, and cool values of associating yourself with characters who elicit such responses. I think we can all understand why these are the responses of children. But do these feelings carry on after the child graduates from the demographic of the weekly cartoon on television? Do they carry on when their exposure to the character is maybe one new film every 3 summers? When most children are old enough, at least 13 according to the teen rating on most books, it's clear that they aren't still continuing on to the monthly comic books. The sloping sales numbers confirm this. Why, if we, as children and as summer moviegoers, are so infatuated with the heroes from Marvel and DC, the two big comic publishers, aren't we interested in their continuing adventures? Undoubtedly, a number of things are at play. Often mentioned is the severe lack of books considered all ages that in times past allowed children to transition into their teens and later, still enthralled with this periodical narrative format. In this age, there is quite a difference between the books aimed at children and those rated teen and up. And I don't just mean the more true-to-life violence and some sexuality. I mean the depth of characters and the freedom to tell complex stories over multiple monthly installments. So it's either something very kiddie cartoon-like and self-contained in one issue, or a something much heavier and sprawling, perhaps into multiple monthly books. Say goodbye to your meager allowance, kiddo, and your ability to follow the story. There could be more transitional and outright all-age appropriate books. 2 books come to mind that recently have fit this mold. Francis Manapul and Brian Bucceletto's current stint on The Flash from DC, Roger Langridge and Chris Samnee's collected 2-volume Thor the Mighty Avenger from Marvel. They're witty, but not overly silly, well drawn, amazingly, depending on your style preference, and full of great story. I'd recommend both for almost any age that can actually read it. Today's average superhero comic book reader loves superheroes, follows their exploits every month, goes to the comic book store each week and downloads comics online because they want to know more about the superhero's story, whether that is the conclusion to the startling cliffhanger from the month before or the real story behind the shadowy character in the hero's past that will change the way we see the hero forever. At least until the next reboot. These fans want to know more about what these little story nuggets will mean for the heroes and their world's big picture. With the age transition help from the publishers, there could be many, many more of these average, invested, and dedicated readers. So if the average moviegoer isn't obsessed with superheroes because of deep narratives, with rich universe-spanning continuity and compelling complex characterizations, then what is it? Big explosions and fit bodies in spandex? Perhaps, but it can't be that simple, right? Our society seems to be obsessed with superheroes that they can impose their own story on, or a hero at a distance, where they are just strong, fast, smart, mysterious, tough, or graceful. It reminds me of some of the faithful's view of God. They have a vague idea of God from childhood, but eventually stopped going to their religion's weekly meeting and stopped learning about their faith. Instead, they are left with a big, strong God whom they feel dedicated to, but know very little about. Our culture, or at least the youth, do seem to be obsessed, if only momentarily, with the idea of superheroes, in getting themselves out of short-term problems, but not anything that requires weeks, months, years, and decades of commitment to unwind and set right. Also, I want to emphasize that perhaps it is more the idea of a superhero that we are collectively obsessed with, than the particulars. And I don't see this as a step forward. Perhaps you remember in your youth having a crush or small infatuation with a person. My recollection of these sorts of things is that during the infatuation, only what is perceived from limited contact and whatever is publicly portrayed shapes the obsessor's picture of the obsessee. In other words, the obsessor doesn't know the person very well and only has their own rosy and likely unrealistic view of them. Let's say the object of your obsession fell deathly ill or suffered some sort of catastrophic injury. Suddenly, your obsession with an idea of this person is shared by much of your peer group, or perhaps an entire school. Young people are putting up support banners, wearing custom bracelets, bandying around the person's name as a saint, and occasionally reduced to sobbing when reflecting on the devastation of a possible world without this person. Now, of course, this circumstance is tragic, and should be a unifying event for any community. But those who deeply know the person are certainly having a different experience than the rest. Comic book fans can enjoy the slugfests that are often prominently featured in their heroes' exploits on the big screen, but that isn't the length and breadth of their comic books each month. Sure, there are outrageously drawn-out battles, somewhat regularly, but without backstories attaching us to the characters, who would care? Detail is like relationship, and relationship requires a lot of deliberate attention. In our world of text messages, Facebook updates, game notifications, and old-fashioned calls, all routing to our phones, no matter where we are, it's no wonder we seem to have less of a propensity to go deep into fictional worlds, if not our real relationships. So what would it be like if I had superpowers? And how would this situation I find myself in be different, and fantastically so? I live in a small city where most of the residents parallel park into any space they can squeeze into. On this day, I'm lucky enough to have found a space just in front of my house. This doesn't happen a majority of the time, mind you. And since I don't have the ability to see into the future, read soon-to-be leaving drivers' minds, or see through walls to detect a neighbor putting on their jacket and grabbing their keys, sometimes it is difficult to find a space, even within a block or two. But like I said, today's parking space is like a little victory for the city dweller. With that in mind, I drive a compact car, a little 2001 Toyota Echo, that often fits in the small gaps that standard sedans, station wagons, and SUVs do not. On the rare occasion where many spaces are open, I try to park close enough to the nearest car to maximize the possible number of cars yet to park, and still allow both vehicles to eventually depart unscathed. This, in my opinion, is just being neighborly, and what an informed city dweller ought to do for his or her fellow city dwellers. Clearly, not everyone shares my viewpoint. Today, for instance, behind my car was enough room for 2 average-sized sedans to fit. Was being the operative word. Now there is but one car parked almost exactly in the center of that space. On occasion, it crosses my mind that perhaps the car's owner is an out-of-towner. But some cars are here with enough regularity to be residents. What to do? Should I leave a nicely worded note? Something like, please park more considerately of others looking for parking spots. Maybe? But what if I could actually do something about it in the moment, where a space is needed for me or a neighbor? What if I could calmly and without strain to myself or damage to the vehicle, move the car enough for another to fit as well? What would that be like? Would it be best to levitate the vehicle with psychic powers, or would the slightest distraction be enough to send the car crashing down or into an adjacent house? Maybe a hands-on approach, using physical super strength, would allow most control of the situation. Though car alarms are pretty sensitive these days. We might need a team of superpowered neighbors to collaborate through deliberation to make it happen, but surely the car owner wouldn't even notice the move of only a few feet one way or another. And the common good would be served, even if the offending driver did the same thing a few streets away later that very day. That's one type of superhero. A lofty one, wishing to return, or force, depending on one's view, society to a place of fairness, equality, and measured justice. We see this exemplified in DC Universe characters like Superman, The Flash, and their Golden Age predecessors, the Justice Society of America. Basically, it's like a town giving people special legal powers to become the police or judges, but a little bolder. However, a different sort of character, one of the more revenging persuasion, might feel the need to make a permanent, more physically lasting statement on the matter. I'd imagine this person as a muscular, veiny, hulking sort, with crazed, determined eyes and matted wild hair, poised to pounce on a corner roof. This character might first lunge onto the car, crushing its roof in, making it undrivable, and then, with a chuckle, give the driver a further surprise by moving it to the roof of the offender's home. These are 2 options that have likely crossed most of our minds when considering what it would be like to have superhuman powers. Regardless of which one you choose, ask yourself, are either scenario really the best use of missile intercepting, flood damming, perilous asteroid destroying, or bullet deflecting powers? Sure, there are times when a little community cleanup is in order, or a superhuman decides to just use their powers for their own benefit. But this isn't the superhero that once upon a time our culture fell in love with. No, the understandable fantasy scenario misses the big picture that superheroes deal with regularly. So I'm asking, why should we be obsessed with superheroes? My answer is this. It's because of their compelling backstories that, though often fantastical, are much like those of you and I, because of how they come to grips with their powers and figure out how to use them for big picture good. Because of their sometimes city-leveling failures when their egos take center stage, they lose sight of that big picture good, or they just don't measure up. Like Uncle Ben told Peter Parker, with great power comes great responsibility. Yeah, I'll admit it, like a 10-year-old would say, it would be so cool to have superpowers. At least in the short term, until every crazed supervillain decides they want to test out their new ray gun on you and your family. During Mark Waid's enviable writing stint on DC Comics' The Flash, the hero was sued by a store clerk who suffered burns and lost the use of her legs after the Flash missed rescuing her during a mall's destruction. Without giving away a slight twist in the story, the gist was that even the fastest man alive couldn't save everyone and stop every crime. This is something we all struggle with on a smaller scale within our circles of family and friends. And Wally West, as the Flash, had to come to terms with it as one whose self-appointed role was to make everything right. Not unlike great science fiction, superhero stories show us a version of ourselves in a different setting with new rules, but the same basic human problems, with changed faces. This new setting fools us into reevaluating our allegiances and gives us permission to think about it freely, having no impact on our world, at least while still in the story. The story gives us time to weigh it all out and do with it what we please in the real world. My wife, who has indulged me by reading a few comic books, had her own take on the superhero appeal for the average person. Megan's very smart and a real big-picture person. She said that the accidental nature of how many heroes get their powers, or become a hero, leaves open the possibility that the same could happen to anyone, including them. I agree. The teenage geek Peter Parker becoming Spider-Man is a great example of this. But it turns out that becoming and living as that alter ego changes the person. And so we wouldn't be the same either. Those heroes aren't just us with masks on. They're us changed with the weight of the world into something grander, higher, and better. Superheroes are us with a big picture view that we could all learn from and still have plenty of flaws.
That was Chris Flinchbaugh. You can read more of Chris's thoughts on his blog at chrisflinchbaugh.blogspot.com. Coming up when the Lancast continues, we learn about the hype machine, and we take a look at superhero movies from the perspective of someone who dislikes them. Hey everybody, we're here at Penn Cinema to find out what everyone's been talking about. Excuse me, why do you choose Penn Cinema?
I like the seats. They're really comfy. They're a lot nicer than most other places. Even my house.
Oh, this place is great. I mean, it's popcorn. Got some, we got a slushy machine over there. We got 3 clocks. 3 clocks for the Lidditz, the Lancaster, and the Effort at Time, just in case, you don't know what time it is in your area. That's why I love this place. They think about everybody, very friendly.
Has a nicer environment.
It's clean and comfortable. It feels independent. It doesn't feel like part of a system. It feels like as big as it is and as polished as it is, that it feels independent,
Bigger screen, better quality.
So it's really close. It's very clean. We come here all the time.
What do you like about Penn Cinema?
The seats are my favorite thing. Very comfortable. On the rump.
3D IMAX, the whole shebang.
It has a down-home feel, and we love the atmosphere that Penn has created. He really tries to take into account what people want in a theater.
It's really clean, and the seats are really comfy.
Yeah, I like the seats. It's the best movie theater to come to.
Well, you've heard what they have to say. Now come see for yourself. Check out Penn Cinema for first-class movies in a first-rate theater. Located at 541 Airport Road in Lidditz, PA. Welcome back. This is the Lancast. I'm David Moulton, and we've made it to Act 2 of our show. This week we're taking a look at superhero movies and why they draw us in, as well as the hype that surrounds them. Act 2, The Machinist. We all know the hype machine is working around us, but we often don't notice till we've bought into it, or we've been so overwhelmed by it that we stop caring. Which brings me to the thought, when does the hype machine actually start?
Obviously there's the, infinite casting announcements. And when I say casting announcements, it's like, oh, this person is in talks. It's like, oh, this person has agreed but hasn't signed the contract. Oh, this person has now signed the contract. So it's the same amount of news for it's the same thing, just, told 3 times in a row. I think that's when things first start. But then you get into the whole marketing with, the screenshots and movie posters and trailers and, viral website nonsense and everything like that. So
that's Rob Bricken from Topless Robot. Rob makes a living spreading the word about upcoming nerd and geek lifestyle news. By doing so, this places him in a unique position of being both a fan and a perpetuator of the hype. I asked him if he considered himself a willful cog of the hype machine.
I certainly am, and I would say sometimes I'm an unwilling cog in that machine. I mean, it's, as a nerd news site, I mean, I post these trailers for good or ill, and the featurettes, and like something, I wouldn't say Prometheus is obviously a superhero movie, but it's, you know, a genre picture. They've released a million trailers and a million TV spots, and now I'm posting them not because they are offering anything new, but because I'm bitter that they've, you know, come out so much. That's my news now, where it's like, oh my God, yet another trailer for Prometheus for no reason whatsoever. But the news is what I do. So whether I like it or not, or whether I think it's, you know, pure hype or not, I mean, that's, you know, I'm helping build up the hype, and the hype is helping people come to my website. So it's synergistic, or, you know, I'm a parasite living off the hype machine. It's whatever.
This is where things get interesting, because as a piece of the machine, Rob is able to see through the blinders of hype and take note of the trends. Taking that perspective into consideration, it causes you to wonder, if hype can get me excited about a movie, is it also changing my opinion of the movie?
No, I mean, I think the movies have really, when they're finally seen, they're judged on their own merits. I mean, Avengers had insane hype, but it pretty well lived up to it. And if the hype had been different, the movie would have been just as good. And I think it would have been just as well received. Like, the Green Lantern, you know, there was a decent amount of hype for that, but everyone's like, this isn't looking weird. And when it comes out, it's like, oh, this pretty much sucks. So I don't know. I think we understand there's hype, but I don't think it's really like, when we see the films, if we feel let down, it's based on the movie's merits. It's not because we think, oh, everything looked totally awesome in the trailers. We know that these are, you know, pure marketing things and trickery, and they're, you know, supposed to make us super excited. So we understand that, you know, we may be excited or not, but that has no real bearing on how the movie itself will be.
Do you think this is a fashion that's changed over time? Like perhaps maybe when they first started coming out, people were more upset with the disappointments or more excited about the films, but now that there's so many, maybe they're easier accepted?
I think it's more like the films have gotten so much better and treated with more, I don't want to say respect, but, you know, a certain amount of respect. I mean, think about, you know, the original films of, like, you know, there's Tim Burton's Batman comes out, it's like, oh my God, it's a, you know, a superhero movie where it's taken seriously, and then you end up getting, you know, stuff like the Schumacher Batmans, and you have weirdness like the Shadow and the Phantom and everything like that, and there's just no, you know, no one cares about the property. No one, you know, no one tried to do anything other than a mediocre film. And nowadays, people are like, oh, these are big characters. They're our fans. We can actually, you know, make these for mass audiences and fans and so forth like that. And so if we do it right, you know, it'll be, I think that's more the thing where the expectations have gotten higher because the products have gotten better.
And what if the movie doesn't live up to the hype? What do you expect from your audience?
Well, again, hype if something sucks. I mean, a lot of bitching. Certainly I do it. You know, Green Lantern comes to mind. You know, people are upset because even when, although this is like the golden age of the, you know, superhero film, I mean, one wreck can cause a lot of problems. So, like, yes, Marvel's done great, but like, the Wolverine movie tanks, and now we've got to wait forever for another Wolverine. I mean, Green Lantern tanks, and now DC is totally back to the drawing board, except for, you know, Superman and Batman. I mean, think about it. If the first Superman film had been good, if Superman Returns had been good, we would have had like an awesome sequel with, you know, him fighting, I don't know, Doomsday or Darkseid or something like that. And so that's the problem. They're real ramifications for the, you know, the comics movie entertainment when these things totally suck.
Do you think that they give up on them too easy?
Well, they're two real players. I mean, let's just say, Marvel has a great amount of patience and they've got a plan and they know what they're doing, and it's kind of insane that it's worked out so well. But Warner Brothers has no idea what they're doing, and they, so whenever the stars align and they get together and finally make a movie of something that's not, or when they just make a movie, if it doesn't work out to their expectations, if it's not like Chris Nolan's Batman, then they freak out and, go back to the drawing board for, 5+ years. That's exactly what happened with Superman. Green Lantern was bad enough, and now they don't even know if they want to do Flash or Wonder Woman. I mean, Wonder Woman's one of the most iconic characters ever, and they've still never figured out how they can do it. It's madness. For other studios like Sony and Spider-Man and Fox and X-Men, part of their, giving up is just that they want to keep the rights to those films. Like, I truly feel The Amazing Spider-Man is less about like starting a new franchise and more about just, we have to make a Superman or Spider-Man film to keep the copyright to keep the rights to make Spider-Man films, and while we figure out what we want to do for a real franchise later, we'll just kind of crap this one out.
Okay, so it can be said, in general, the hype for a superhero movie won't drastically change if you like it or not. But what about if you see it or not? Are we as a collective fan base ever so overwhelmed with the marketing machine that we decide to not go see our favorite tight-wearing vigilante?
I think to do that is like when you don't want to share something. And I think about it this way. I was an Avengers fan as a kid, and the fact that there's a movie blows my mind. And the fact that it's good and popular and lots of people like it, I think that's great. I mean, I would much rather have an Avengers movie be a big hit and have some, changes for mass audiences to make it more appealing than, say, like a 100% accurate to my, imaginary version of the Avengers that are perfect in my head, and it tank. It's, when I was younger, obviously it had that thing where like, oh, if it gets popular, I can't like it anymore. It somehow sold it, but I no longer think that. That's let me put it this way. You can make stuff for fans and you can make stuff for mass audiences. And I think the movies that have been the most successful are the ones that try to reach both audiences at the same time. And it's difficult to do, to make things that are for fans that mass audiences can enjoy, and make things for mass audiences that fans don't, bitch about. But when you do it and you do it right, I think it works out for everybody, the movie most of all.
Which kind of actually ties right into what I wanted to ask you next. Would you say that superhero movies are catering to the fans right now, or more towards the general masses?
Well, like I said, I think there's a good balance. I think the ones that are most catering to the fans are the Marvel movies, but they've done a very good job of, casting characters and having good writers and directors that, my wife has never read an Avengers comic book, but she went with me to see the movie and loved it. But as a fan, I saw all these bits and pieces like, oh, well, it didn't reference this one panel from Avengers 277 or anything like that. But I thought, oh, that's Thor, that's Hawkeye. It doesn't need to be slavishly devoted to the source material, but it just can't feel untrue. It's not like I need Thor to wear his old, Simonson outfit or anything like that. I understand that things have to be made for the movie, and for mass audiences to hang on to, but it just needs to feel true. And I think that's very tough to do, but I think the Marvel does it very, very well. When you run into stuff like Green Lantern, I don't know, it connected the dots. There was Sinestro, there was Parallax, there was Carol Ferris, but it didn't feel like it was really appealing to the fans at all. There wasn't like any fan moments, and then there wasn't enough of a decent enough story, or the character wasn't really that interesting either. So that mass audiences didn't care for it either.
If these movies are becoming more targeted to their audiences, one might come to the conclusion that they are also becoming more formulaic to a point, and that upon hearing about a new superhero movie, you can just assume what's going to be in it. But Rob doesn't think so. He believes you can't really compare a movie like The Avengers with something like Nolan's Batman. They're too different, and the next big blockbuster really could end up anywhere between those two. Or it could go in a new direction altogether. So, if there is no formula for making these films, what type of things make or break a superhero movie?
You know, it's tough to say, but I think they have to be fun and exciting. I mean, the Marvel's done very well at keeping them light and exciting, more fluffy. I think Nolan's films have gone for more thoughtful, possibly less fun, more psychological stuff, but they've got plenty of action sequences. But I'm a little worried about this third one, that it's going to be all just psychological, nonsense and not enough Batman punching people. I think there's got to be a certain amount of accuracy to the source material, because there's a reason that these characters are so beloved and so well known. I'm not saying you can't put change people's outfits or something like that, but when you start changing stuff willy-nilly for no apparent reason, not to make things accessible, that's when you start running into trouble.
Rob Bricken. You can hear more of Rob's thoughts on nerd news, humor, and self-loathing at toplessrobot.com. Act 3, It's My Party and I'll Cry If I Want To. With superhero movies being so mainstream these days, it might be something of an enigma to find someone who dislikes them and yet will still be willing to talk about them, knowing very well the backlash of the mob. Enter Jacob Gaiman. Jacob wrote in an essay which I'll be narrating about just how much he dislikes superhero movies and how even he, too, can get sucked up in the hype. I hate superhero movies. As a logical person, I'm forced to admit that saying, I hate superhero movies is not a logical thing to say, but I'm comfortable with the awkward logical lapse, so I won't try and justify the clenched stomach muscles, the way my jaw jams together, or the ache that starts to form in my temple whenever I see a preview for a superhero movie. A point of fact for me is ever since the year 2000, when X-Men hit theaters, superhero movies have been a blight on society. As a kid, I used several different pillowcases, depending on cleanliness and my mood, the former dictated by my mother, and the latter by my grade school whims. I don't remember all the pillowcases, but the one which stands out the most significantly featured the Batman logo. Batman, the helper of cops, the hunter of evil, the user of some of the coolest gadgetry ever. Who doesn't want to grow up having an Alfred guy, butler dude, inventor person tending to your every inevitable success? I wasn't a comic book reader, nor was I a frequent viewer of Batman the Animated Series. Yet, laying my head down on the icon of a superhero made me feel about as badass as a 7-year-old kid could feel. At least, one whose hobbies included reading historical biographies and playing Oregon Trail on an early Macintosh computer. Despite my pillow, even then I actively avoided superhero movies. Glimpses of those early Batman movies on TV completely failed to interest me. Now, when I saw X-Men, I rather liked it. Not those stupid superhero movies I'd seen random sections of on television. Perhaps half my enjoyment of the movie came from watching Anna Paquin, the stunning beauty who portrayed Rogue. Sadly, even now, I can excuse a terrible movie for a lot of terrible if there is a beautiful actress on screen. Spider-Man in 2002 was a blockbuster. I hated it. Everyone I knew seemed to go Spider-Man crazy. I just saw an awkward kid in a dumb suit with an unbelievable love story. Being a nerdy, vengeful loner, not too dissimilar to Peter Parker, I cheered when he didn't stop the thief. I cheered more when the thief became a murderer and the realization of what happened sneaked across Peter Parker's face. But Parker hit me where it hurts the most by his refusal to pursue Mary Jane. That wasn't the core reason I hated Spider-Man, but it was the reason I didn't emotionally jive with the movie. The superhero movie release pace increased after that. X2, Daredevil, Hulk, Spider-Man 2, Hellboy, Catwoman, Elektra. More were hated than loved by the theater-flocking folk, but the ones which were loved drove the genre to new heights. The reboot of the Batman series, Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins, kicked the genre from high-octane action/sci-fi fantasy into the realm of art. I haven't read every professional review of Batman Begins, but I'm willing to bet they all include the words dark and gritty. And Batman Begins is a very dark, gritty film, but it's also slathered with polish and shine. It goes down like a fine wine. The second Batman movie from Nolan was preceded by a lot of other superhero movies I either didn't see or didn't like, including Fantastic Four, X-Men The Last Stand, Spider-Man 3, Superman Returns, and Iron Man. I didn't like Spider-Man 3, which had me agreeing with those who actually liked the first two Spider-Man movies. Yet, at the same time, I wasn't in agreement with them by thinking, at the least, Spider-Man 3 was better than the two movies preceding it. Angry, angsty Peter Parker is way more entertaining than boring, normal Parker. The Dark Knight wasn't a surprise like Batman Begins was, but what it lacked in surprise, it made up for by being really, insanely awesome. The movie was released surrounded by the death of Heath Ledger. Audiences were somber walking in, and they were greeted to the unbalanced vision of Ledger leering at the screen, his lips curling in insanity, but his eyes intelligent and dead. The Dark Knight ended up being everything Batman Begins is, except for more of everything. Darker, grittier, and more engaging. More perfect. And everyone ate it up. Audiences everywhere were blown away. Critics rated it very highly. It stands at a sparkling 94% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is in the neighborhood of non-superhero critical darling films like The King's Speech at 95% and The Social Network at 96%. The Dark Knight is certified fresh. It kicked the superhero business into overdrive. More flops clogged the screen than success. But the ensuing year saw the much-debated Watchmen release, the second Iron Man movie, and the edgy, indie-flavored ruminations of the whole vigilante superhero justice thing, with Kick-Ass and Super. Which brings me, and you, and the whole world, to 2012. I don't know if anyone has dubbed 2012, either officially or not, the year of the superhero, but it looks like it has the potential. 3 blockbusters grace this year's marquee. 3 movies that will rack in major money. I had gone to see The Cabin in the Woods with some friends, which, as an aside, is a fantastic film. While waiting for the movie to start, there was a preview for the Avengers, and I couldn't help to think, it is absurd the wide spectrum of movies that theaters consider appropriate to put superhero trailers in front of. Any chance to get to showcase a green thing destroying a building, or a blue thing wiping out whole armies is a good opportunity, I guess. As the first superhero movie of the year, The Avengers is the first superhero movie since The Dark Knight to cause me to text my friends and say, "You want to see a movie?" Facebook exploded as friends set their status updates to read, "Going to see The Avengers, so excited!" Followed by, "Saw The Avengers, so good!" The Amazing Spider-Man is up next, a reboot of the Spider-Man franchise. It's a weird move since the Spider-Man movie is only 10 years old. Considering the popularity of the franchise, though, it should still do well in the box office. I mean, My superhero friends have been salivating over the trailer for a month or two. I will not be seeing it. I hate Spider-Man. It is The Dark Knight Rises, slated for release in July, which has everyone on the edge of their seats, even me. And I do a pretty good job on hating those films. I hate superhero movies, is how I started this essay off, and I stick by that assertion. I said some nice, critically ambiguous things about Nolan's Batman movies earlier, but right now I'd feel just as happy if I never saw either of them again. When I saw The Dark Knight, I remember leaving the theater and feeling like I witnessed the return of Jesus. I was giddy, blathering on about Heath Ledger and that ending, and Heath Ledger and that beginning, and Heath Ledger, blather, blather, blah, blah, blah. The high lasted precisely until the moment I saw the movie a second time on home video. I liked it still, but my reaction was more along the line of, oh yeah, right, than the initial, oh my god, awesome. And then came the third time, which had me checking my clock, wondering if it would ever end. And yet, I keep thinking about that initial theatrical experience, and thinking that perhaps, just maybe, Nolan will do it again. Never mind that 90% of what made The Dark Knight so awesome the first time around was Ledger. I still hope, I still desire, and I will still flock to the theater to find out if Nolan can, once again, cause me to stumble out of a theater, babbling like a madman, while a quiet voice deep down inside me recites, I hate superhero movies. You can find more of the rantings of Jacob Gaiman on his Tumblr, titled Movies, Awesome, Unholy, and Terrible, at moviesaut.tumblr.com. Or follow him on Twitter at SirTheory. Today's show is produced by myself, David Moulton, with production assistance in the first act by Keith Slesser. A big thanks to all those who gave us stories for this episode: Mike and Alex Snyder, Chris Flinchbaugh, Rob Bricken, and Jacob Gaiman. Links to all their things online can be found at thelancast.com. Support for this episode was provided by Winding Way Books, Pennsylvania College of Art and Design, and listeners like you. If you'd like to help support us with a donation, please visit thelancast.com/donate. I want to say an extra special thanks to my co-host, Keith Slesser, for supporting the idea of doing a show like this. Although I have to say I'm glad he didn't take a more active role in producing the show, because he started showing an abnormal obsession with Act 3.
I'm a little worried about this third one, that it's going to be all just psychological, nonsense and not enough Batman punching people.
From the Lancast in Lancaster, PA, I'm David Moulton, asking, are you in the cast? On the count of three, everyone. 1, 2, 3. Superhero!